Hello, hello, and welcome to the Psych-Intuitive Institute and the Coaching Certification course. My name is Tamara Powell, and I am half of the incredible Psych-Intuitive Institute founding team. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I'm also a psychology instructor at the University of West Florida, and a transformative coach to other coaches and creatives in the area. For those of you who don't know me, I am so excited to be kicking off this incredible life-changing certification course with you guys. And today we're going to be covering all sorts of things, everything from what you can expect in this course, what you can expect from Ashley and I, and some of the basic coaching skills that you will need to get your business where you want to go and to create the life-changing transformations in your clients and in yourself. I hope you guys are excited as I am. Just a quick reminder and suggestion, you might want to have the notes printed out for this PowerPoint and or a journal and pen to take notes. If you have questions, leave them for the end and pop them into the Facebook group or into an email. Ashley and I are always here ready to answer those questions for you. She and I have spent thousands upon thousands of dollars and years learning what we're going to try to condense for you guys and help you take everything to the next level so that you don't have to go through all the boring courses and master's education, PhD education, unless you so choose to, in which case, hey, girlfriend, we'll cheer you on there too. All right, let's get started. Week 1, the coaching skills, all the basics and then some. And we say and then some because we are taking it past just the normal stuff that you'll get in a lot of the other so-called training courses, because we're bringing you the psychology and the counseling and all of the kick-ass skills of neuroscience that you're not going to get anywhere else. All right, an introduction to this course. Let's talk about the layout of this course. There are 6 modules, and we're going to spend 2 weeks in each module. You'll have 1 week with me and 1 week with Ashley. Like I said, alternating our instructors. The format, you're going to be getting a weekly video along with these slides and handouts, so that way you can keep along with us and come back to it whenever you want. It's an interactive course for sure. We're also going to have bi-weekly group meetings, and you guys are so lucky here in this first round if you are taking this first round with us on the replay, because we're doing it every other week. We're going to answer your phone calls and answer your phone calls. We're going to answer your questions live on the call. And if you're not able to make the call, they will be archived for you, and we will answer any questions that you have written in for us to get into. The future rounds of this, we're going to move towards once a month. So this is super cool for those of you who chose to join us on the beta session of this. Support. You've got a private Facebook group with everyone else who is taking this course and Ashley and I. For those of you who have chosen to join us for the actual certification, congratulations. You're going to be a Psych-Intuitive coach, a certified Psych-Intuitive coach. You're going to get extra trainings on business startup and helping find clarity. That's going to give you the ultimate success in your business. We're going to walk you through so much that seriously, I wish I had had someone else to help me with that I wasn't paying big bucks for. And in order to get this final certification, you're going to have to go through some role plays and an exam. Nothing too big, guys. Don't freak out about it. We're going to be there to walk you right through it. But it's important that you have some hands-on experiential practice with this. So what are you going to learn? Well, first of all, you're going to get some deeply transformative coaching skills, all of the good stuff. How does human behavior happen? What makes change possible? And how do we transform? It's really important to Ashley and I that we help coaches become the type who can provide deep and lasting change. And for us personally, we believe that that happens through having an understanding of psychology and the basics of the brain and how human behavior works. We're also going to cover core coaching competencies like how do you select your dream clients? Seriously, this cannot be overstated, guys. There are so many people out there who I tend to say are they're like the type that are willing to whore themselves out to anyone and they get frustrated. And you do not want to take on clients that you're not well suited for because you want people to become your raving fans. You want them to be the best piece of marketing that you could get. And what's amazing is that your dream clients are going to be free marketers for you. We're also going to talk about goal setting. How do you know how to set your goals with clients? How do we know which goals are actually achievable? How do we help clients decide where they're going to get their maximum bang for their buck, so to speak? We're going to talk about the most effective ways to ask questions. I know some of this may sound simplistic, and I suppose in theory it is, but simple does not mean easy, guys. And there are some better ways than others to ask questions, let me tell you. Building rapport, so important. All of the research shows that when clients are finished with a coach, a doctor, a therapist, you name it, that what they walk away from, what they will remember is how you made them feel, not so much what you said. And I guess depending upon the way you look at it, this is either incredibly empowering or incredibly frustrating. But basically, it's all about your relationship with that client. So you could be in our counseling world coming at it from a cognitive behavioral perspective or an existential perspective. That's kind of me and Ashley right there. And at the end of the day, we're both going to produce amazing results for our clients. It doesn't matter which modality we're using, as long as that relationship is strong. So you really, really do need to know how to build rapport. We're also going to cover what to do when clients get stuck. And I don't want to scare you guys, but clients are going to get stuck. Typically, a few sessions in, they're going to bump into some resistance, and we're going to teach you how to roll through that. You're also going to get an understanding of the psychological and neurological basis for change. Super exciting, guys. Not only are you going to have some great trivia to bring up at cocktail parties, you're going to know the inside and outsides of human behavior in a way that other coaches around you aren't going to. We're actually going to break down the way that the brain works for you in all its awesomeness and glory, but we're going to do it in a way that is easy to understand. I promise you, you're not going to have to sit through semester after semester like we did of cognitive neuroscience. We are going to get into the basics like neurons and neurotransmitters, transmitters, and how they relate to clients presenting concerns. We're going to talk about neuroplasticity and why it is so powerful. The biological side of thoughts, emotions, and behavior. So you've seen other coaches talking about it, but do you know why? Why does that happen? Why does an emotion stick around for as long as it does? Why does behavior become resistant to change? We're going to give you the biology behind it. So hold on to your hats. And then what we are super excited about is the other side of it. Not only are we giving you the psychology, but guys, we're taking it beyond into the stratosphere by helping you learn how to tap into your intuition, right? Psych-intuitive coaching. You're going to be able to do both. Your intuition helps provide a roadmap for transformation. And Ashley and I believe that the best coaches work from an inspired inner place of knowing that is rooted in theory. It's both. So we take a look at mankind, as being both body, mind, and spirit, all of them. And so, if you're going to affect change, it is important that you tap into all of those levels. Yes, we want coaches to pay attention in their intuition. We're going to help you identify your own spiritual gifts. But it's important for us that it is rooted in evidence based theory. Like I said, we're going to teach you to explore your own unique gifts. This is usually where the coaches that we work with get really excited, and why your spiritual gifts are essential to creating profound change. I'm assuming most of you came from our Facebook groups, and both Ashley and I tend to run psychic guidance threads here and there. We have overlapping spiritual gifts, but they have very different flavors. This is key for us as we market in our business. It's key for us in our sessions. We don't just go from psychological theory, we also trust our intuition and we pull from our spiritual gifts as needed or desired. So, we're going to cover some of the different types of spiritual gifts, things like clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience, you name it. We're going to talk about mediumship a bit. Now, into the nitty gritty of today's module or this week's module. Before we began, Ashley and I sat down to outline these modules, and we both felt incredibly strong about leading with ethics and integrity. Guys, there are 1,000,005 coaches out there, if not more, right? It is a billion-dollar industry, and for good reason. I personally think everybody needs a counselor or coach, and that's not just a business practice. I keep my own as well, which we'll get into in a minute. But I have noticed among some of the Facebook groups, some of the entrepreneur groups, being at conferences, etc., that there are some coaches who are very grounded in ethics and integrity, and some who aren't. And I know, once again, you're probably going, well, duh, of course it's important to have integrity. But there are some subtle nuances that many, many coaches do not pay attention to, potentially through no fault of their own, because again, it's not a regulated industry, so they just may not know. But for us, this is the bedrock, and this is where we are going to start. Why do ethics matter? Well, first of all, coaching happens in a context of trust. If it is not a good fit, if I don't fully trust you in all areas, both your knowledge, your expertise, the way that you bring yourself into the room, I trust what you're going to do with my confidentiality, then I will not be able to open up to you and get the change that I am looking for. So I'm telling you, it only takes a split second for somebody to suddenly have a root of doubt creep in, and it unfortunately affects so much. Now, if it happens and there is a breach, which we're going to talk about, you can come back from it. But it's just really, really important that we say from the beginning, all of this comes down to trust. So you want to be able to walk into the room and make, or even a virtual room online, and make your client feel comfortable and that they can trust you. A great coach is aware of his or her own cognitive blindness. And by that, we mean that there is a gap, typo, between what we know and what we don't know that we don't know. Okay. It is impossible for you to know absolutely everything about everyone, every type of presenting concern, etc. And one of the fastest ways that you will build some distrust in your client is if you come across as if you know it all. Now, the flip side also needs to be said. It is very important, and this is why you're in this training course, that you come across as knowledgeable and comfortable. I can't put myself in someone else's hands if I don't feel like they're going to take care of me. So going along with cognitive blindness is also about your biases. Okay. It is important that you know, and everyone likes to walk in to my undergraduate psychology courses and even some of the graduate ones. And now that I'm thinking about it, even some of the postgraduate ones, and tell me, oh, hey, Tamara, you know what? I have been working on myself. I am about as objective as they come. I have no problems leaving my biases at the door. And I'm like, great. I'm glad that you've been practicing it. But you know what? It is an ever evolving process, and you will always be biased simply because of who you are. For example, I am about to be 40 and I am a white woman and I have a shaved head on one side, actually both sides now. That is a stimulus value. I cannot help but elicit a response from people when I walk in the room, right? They see me and they automatically think certain things. The same is true in reverse. I cannot speak to that which I don't know, and it is impossible for me to know what it is like for an Asian man who has been in an internment camp. I can guess, but I cannot absolutely say for sure, right? And so cognitive blindness and biases are very important. It is impossible to get rid of them completely, but it is important to always be taking note of them. Moving on, a great coach is professional and clear about the nature of the coaching process he or she provides. How do you personally go about it? This does include boundary setting, protocols for handling resistance, or other common issues as they come up. So, this is an ongoing process both before your first session starts and as you move through it. What are some of your boundaries? For example, can clients message you on Facebook? Can they follow you on social media? Can they call your office outside of business hours? What are your business hours? Can they text you? And it's not just about contact either. It's also about payments. It's also about what happens if you guys see each other out in public. Now, it's not as deep or thorough as perhaps, say, for a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but coaches definitely have to have boundaries as well. What happens when a client starts to struggle? Like we said, do you have a protocol for helping them move through it? Moving on to how ethical standards actually help you in business. I promise it seems like such a Debbie Downer and so dry at times, but it actually helps keep your business running like a well oiled machine. Ethical coaches create trust with their prospective clients. This means that they're actually going to generate more clients. Integrity, honesty, and immense value. Learn them, love them, live them. These are the three things that can be your most valuable marketing asset. But like I alluded to before, they're almost impossible to regain once you've lost them. Both Ashley and I have been burnt by other coaches. And I tell you what, all it takes is a quick second, for example, a misguided Facebook post, before you have lost someone forever. So keep this in mind: integrity, honesty, and immense value. For example, this course that you're taking right now, you all put up a decent chunk of change for it. And Ashley and I have made sure every step of the way that we are going to go above and beyond to deliver to you not only what you thought you were getting, but a bajillion times more, so that you become our raving fans as well, if you're not already. The three steps of building a business include having potential clients know, like, and trust you. Ethics help build the most important step: trust. So, know, like, and trust. If you haven't heard this before, I'd partially be surprised, but let's go over it. First of all, you'd have to have heard of a potential coach. You got to know them. You have to know that they exist before you can become their client, right? From there, you start following them and you start to develop an affinity for them. You start to like them. Research shows that it usually takes about 7 to 10 touches. And by touches, we mean them showing up for you in a way that is very relevant to you before they start to trust you. They have to trust you before they buy from you. So if you're not an ethical coach, you're not going to move clients through that process to that third step where clients want to sign on and work with you. All right, difference between ethical coaches and others. Ethical coaches know the boundaries of their knowledge. This is huge. Let me tell you why. Because once you've been in the industry for a while, you're going to start to get offers from all sorts of people, right? Great. Great news, right? What a great problem to have. However, You cannot, once again, be all things to all people. You just can't. So, for example, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I can certainly treat pretty much anything in that big purple book of the DSM, the diagnostical. Gosh, words are hard at this moment. Diagnosis statistical manual, right? However, sorry, there was an odd noise, guys. However, that doesn't mean I should. Okay, there each coach, each counselor has certain specializations, and it's important that you know what you know and what you don't know and stay with it. So if you're a health coach, you shouldn't be treating sexual issues. Okay? You just shouldn't. And if you're a business coach, perhaps you should not be working with moms of teenagers and that's their presenting concern. So you need to know where the boundaries of your knowledge lies and be able to be upfront with that with clients. Ethical coaches always act with integrity and in the interests of their clients over the bottom line. Clients first. Doesn't matter how much money they dangle in front of you. I have had clients that have asked me to do things that I know were not going to be in their best interest long term. For example, I have worked with couples who I just could not, with good conscience and integrity, put my license on the line and continue to treat them because they were caught up in some very destructive behaviors, perhaps domestic violence or toxic codependency. And until those were treated first, it didn't matter if they wanted to pay me my full fee. My interest in their interests had to take precedence over the money. Ethical coaches are differentiated from amateurs. Ethical coaching differentiates the professionals from the amateurs. Absolutely, hands down, every time. There are amateurs that step into the ring every single day. They throw up a shingle, they feel like they have something to talk about, and without taking time to set up these boundaries, to set up these protocols, to learn some of the basics on ethics, they clearly end up showing their true colors. And you can tell the difference. You can smell them from a mile away. Ethical coaches are never afraid to ask questions, to get support, or wait to give their client their knowledge. Yes, all the time, all day, every day. You don't know something? Ask. There have been not only from your client, but from your colleagues in an ethical standard that we're going to get into in a while. And Google, get training on something if it's an area that you are interested in. So there have been times when clients have come in. One of my specialties is spirituality. And perhaps they come in with a new one. For example, a while ago, about 2 years ago, I had a client who was from Brazil, and his family background was in candomblé. Okay. And that was something that I had heard on the periphery, but I didn't know all that much about it. So I had to have him explain to me, what does it mean to have a family Orisha? It's kind of like a saint for us here in the United States. How does that play out for you? Had I allowed my ego to get involved, I would not have had that very vital conversation with that client, and I could have lost his trust, and that would have been a big problem. It's also important to get support. There have been times when a client issue has been somewhat triggering, perhaps, or someone handled, it's usually not one of my direct clients, but say someone calls up or you get a troll on Facebook. It's important that you have support, that you have a support system, and we'll dive more into that in a bit. Um, and if you don't know something, it is more ethical to say, hey, hang on to that question. I will come back to you. Finally, ethical coaches believe their clients' privacy, confidentiality, and safety are the utmost concern over all else, including your marketing and your bottom line. Clients absolutely should have the right to expect privacy and confidentiality. We, meaning Ashley and I, have seen way too many coaches sharing way too much information on Facebook, including who's joined their group, etc. That's a big no-no unless you have a client's express, preferably written permission. And even then, it's important that you are careful of it because you need to be aware of what type of impression are you giving to everyone else who is watching you and your business. Let's talk about the coaching industry. It is currently an unregulated industry. By that, we mean that the federal government and state governments have not stepped in to say, here are the guidelines that you must adhere to, and you must pay this regulatory body, and you must have a certain amount of continuing education credits every single year, for example, that I have to do as a licensed counselor. Now, there are some awesome pros and cons to this that we will get into. That being said, there are some pretty commonly agreed upon standards in coaching, right? Like we all tend to agree that coaches should have some training. That's why you're here, and we're so excited to have you. We also agree that clients should have some privacy. Most people would agree upon that. We also agree that it should be, as we're going to talk about, goal oriented. So when you look at coaches, we tend to see some pretty common overlaps. You're going to probably either purchase one on one sessions or a program, a time specific program. And hopefully, you're going to go through a pretty basic process of signing an informed consent, having some few conversations, showing up at the agreed upon time, and delivering the results. However, coaching also differs from counseling. Okay in that counseling can be pretty open ended. I have counseling clients that I've worked with for years, and it just depends upon what they are looking for. They may see counseling as self care, which I personally think is incredible. I think everyone should have a dentist. You got a yoga instructor. My God, why not have a counselor? Have someone that holds sacred space for you. Coaching, however, tends to be more goal oriented. We're talking about a specific goal. Maybe I help you with social media marketing. Maybe I help you learn how to launch a business. Maybe I help you heal relationships. There are sex and love coaches, there are health coaches. So it's very goal oriented. It's also solution focused, whereas counseling, oftentimes we're diving into the past, we're helping heal traumas. To quote the incomparable Ashley Greer, coaching is often looked at as reaching down and helping lift people out of the mud, whereas coaching, did I say that right? Counseling is looked at as helping people out of the mud, whereas coaching is boosting them into the sky. So, solution focused, future oriented, present and future oriented. We're not going to so much talk about your past unless it is specifically related to right now. And even then, within limits, right? Because you've signed up for a program. We're trying to get you to your goals within 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, etc. So, it is very time specific, whereas counseling typically can be a lot more open ended. Stay in your lane. I've mentioned this already. Know your role, stay in your lane. Ethical coaches know their expertise and their competency. What are you competent at? What are you capable of delivering on? So, for example, what are you good at, right? If you are great at teaching people about their health, do not necessarily become a business coach unless you happen to have expertise and some training in that area. So, what do you have training in? Know your role, stay in your lane. I happen to have added training on sexuality and spirituality, among other things. I don't necessarily go out there and say, hey, I'm a trauma based therapist. Can I treat trauma? Yeah, but that's not my expertise unless it's related to sex or gender or spiritual abuse, etc. What are your limits? It is important that you know your limits. For example, as a sexual counselor, I don't do sexual surrogacy, which you haven't heard of that yet. Then that is someone who actually will have sex or engage in sexual behaviors with the client. And that can also be done ethically. There's actually an entire board, not to get off on that rabbit trail. But that's a hard limit for me with my license. Nope, not going to go there. I'm also not going to necessarily branch out and start making diet plans for people. I don't have training in that. So it's also important to take a look at, what do people want from you? For those of you who have not started in the coaching industry yet, what do people tend to come up and ask you about? What is it that you are attracting? This is a good hint from the universe as to something you should be building expertise and competency in. Let's dive into the ethics a little bit more. As I mentioned before, coaching is not a regulated industry. However, there are some pretty common recommended values, both by the International Coaching Federation, which you don't have to be a part of unless you chose to, but also from the American Counseling Association, which again, you're not going to be a part of. But basically, my point is that all of these different credentialing boards tend to agree upon some common recommended values that Ashley and I definitely throw our hat in the ring about. First of all, autonomy. It's one of my freaking favorite words. Autonomy. I have autonomy. You have autonomy, meaning you have the right to make decisions over your own life. Client comes in, for example, says, "Hey, I'm gay. My family won't approve of it. But I don't want to go against their word." Now, you may happen to personally feel like this person's life would be so much better off if they just admitted to themselves and the world that they are gay. However, your client has autonomy and you have to respect their decision. Non malfeasance. That's a big mouthful, right? Basically, it means do no harm, just like the physicians. It is important. You're like, duh, Tamara. I know. But it is important that you think very carefully, for example, about those subtle things like making a post on Facebook to celebrate your client's win. I mean, hey, that sounds like a great idea. Who wouldn't want to be proud of what they've just gone through? But you don't know how that client's going to take it unless you ask. And so that action could cause harm. It's important that you avoid that. Beneficence, the exact opposite. You got to not only work for the good of the individual, but also society by promoting well being. So, back to the example of a health coach. A really good ethical health coach is always thinking about taking it beyond just the individual. You're not only working for their good, but you're also helping promote your industry as well, and the helping promote maybe even legislation and advocacy. Justice. It's important to treat individuals equitably by fostering fairness and equality. This may or may not bump up against your personal coaching business. But for example, if you have a policy that you tend to see certain people at a certain fee, it's important that you decide how are you going to handle it when someone else comes in and wants that certain fee. You don't necessarily have to give everyone that same rate. I certainly take a sliding scale here or there, but I have policies in place that make it very clear that I am treating everyone in an equitable manner. Fidelity. This one to me personally is huge. I see so many counselors and coaches, unfortunately, burn their clients on this one. It's important that you honor your commitment, including showing up when you say you're going to show up, not only to your sessions, but in how you deliver outside of the session as well. Keep your promise, not only to your clients, but also in those professional networking relationships. You show up in other entrepreneur groups, it's important that you display fidelity, veracity. It's important that you're dealing with truthfully. And this includes potentially things like if you're working with couples or in a group of clients in a group coaching program, you can't be telling one person one thing and then telling another person another thing. I know you're like, right now, you're going, oh, there's no way that that would happen. And I'm telling you, it's not always that easy. For example, say you're working with an entire family or a couple, or like I said, that group, and one comes to you complaining about somebody else. And then the other one, the person they were complaining about, comes to you about that exact same situation. It becomes so tricky at times to make sure that you're coming across as if you're giving everyone the exact same answer, that you're not talking about people behind their back. But what if they are coming to you and they need you to address the issue with them, right? You need, as their coach, you have to help them work through their feelings. All I'm saying is that it becomes very tricky at times. Not everything's black and white. And so, keeping that core value in your head of veracity and making sure that I come across as truthful as possible is incredibly important. Now, ethics begin before you even have your first session. There is something called an informed consent. And basically, it means that people are educated on absolutely everything possible that you can think of before they sign their name on the dotted line to agree to work with you. This starts with even your contract documents. Ashley and I highly recommend that you either pay someone, there are people in multiple groups that we are both in, like Stacy, who is a spiritual lawyer. But there are also coaching packages that other people have done the grunt work for you, and you can. The prices vary from like as low as I've seen as low as like $20 to, $500, depending upon how in depth they go to have these contract documents. It's important that you protect yourself and it also protects your client. And these contract documents help build the sense of trust, which is amazing and something that people don't think of. But not only are you going to look more professional and streamlined, but it helps protect you, say, if a client ends up upset, God forbid, with something about your program. Some of the recommended things that you might think to include in your contract documents, the length of sessions, okay? Are they 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes? How long are they going to, how long does the program last? 6 weeks, 3 months? You want to schedule that. What happens if they don't show up? What happens if they want to terminate early, etc.? I also recommend thinking about your fee schedule. How often are people going to pay? How are you going to accept payment? Is it going to be PayPal? Are you going to be working with a third-party biller? Is it going to be cash only? It's important that you have these conversations with clients. How are you going to be delivering these sessions? Are they going to be online? Are you using Skype, which is not, you guys don't have to worry about it because coaching isn't regulated, but Skype is not HIPAA compliant. It's important once in a while a client's going to ask you about that. How do you want to deliver that? Zoom, Google Hangouts, what? In person. It's also very important that coaches stress that the client is the one responsible for his or her progress, not you. I know that sounds backwards to a lot of people, but you are there with your knowledge and your expertise and your training to help guide them. You are the navigator, but they are in the driver's seat. And if a client gets depressed or a client gets unmotivated for whatever reason, you do not want them turning around and blaming you. Now, they may still blame you. You can't please everyone. However, it's important to have that in your contract document so you can go back and point to your refund policy. What happens if they decide they want to quit your program 1 month in and you've contracted with them for 3 months? We're not going to tell you how you should do it, like what you should do, but you need to be thinking about that. Make sure that that's covered in there. If they want a refund, do you want to give them one? Cancellation policy. What happens if it is 2 o'clock on a Friday and you're supposed to meet with them at 4 and they cancel? How will you reschedule? Do they get to make up their missed session? If so, how? What happens when you got 5 other people scheduled back to back? These are things you need to think of so that you're not being accused of being unethical. Let's talk confidentiality and privacy. Before you begin your first session, this is another key area and one that is probably the most frequently disregarded, unfortunately. So, when you are marketing, how do you go about using things like client testimonials, client pictures, previous stories, etc.? It is very important, in our opinion, that you have express permission from people. In fact, preferably have them write their own. And if you want to change it, go ahead and say, hey, do you mind if I reword this? And then show them what you were planning to use and have them give the okay. You do not want to be running around talking about things that clients have told you in session without their permission. It's just bad juju and isn't going to get you anywhere, I promise. The few bucks you make in the short run because of an awesome story is going to bite you in the ass later on. Record keeping. Again, you'd think it was a no brainer, but number one, you need to keep records. Let me just say that. Do not just show up week to week without taking any notes. On the other hand, if you're going to take notes, where are you going to store them? Right? You don't want other people being able to walk in and see all of your clients' information, but you want to be able to have a consistent, congruent story for yourself. Personally, I happen to love electronic notes. I use an electronic health record system, an EHR. You don't have to, but there are some free ones out there, and it's just really great to be able to go back and keep track of a client's progress, to keep track of their stories. So, you know, their husband or wife's name, their dog's name, stuff that's been stressing them out. It just makes you look very ethical and trustworthy. And the beauty of an EHR is that it's cloud-based and it's locked up. So, you're not going to have to worry about toting paper around and people coming across it, et cetera. And if you're traveling, which, hey, that's the goal, right? Is to have a lifestyle business where you can travel, then you can access your clients' records from anywhere, but you also know that their sorry guys, that their confidentiality is being well protected. Something a lot of coaches don't necessarily think of is what about emails or sending them documents, etc. Most email servers are not HIPAA compliant. They're not secure. So, not to get into it, but basically, if I'm sending them something, it can go from server to server to server to server. It's kind of like running around with a piece of mail from Orlando and running up to Sarasota and passing it off to somebody at a gas station saying, hey, can you take this over to Mobile? Then they take it over to somebody else. Like, we don't think about the internet that way, but that's actually the way it runs. So by the time you send an email to a client and within 10 seconds, that baton, so to speak, could have been passed on 10 different times throughout the internet. Not that big of a deal typically, but it is important that you think about what am I sending and do I potentially want to pay for a HIPAA secure email, or at the very least, we recommend having a disclaimer at the bottom of your email that says, hey, email's not secure. Be careful what you send me, and vice versa. One of the big ones that I alluded to you before, Facebook groups and other social media. Say you sign your first $1 million client and you're super stoked about it. Do you run and tell people? Not unless you have permission. We don't recommend that. And be careful. We've seen a hell of a lot of cattiness go down in Facebook groups. One coach is talking about another coach, who talks about another coach, who's talking about a client, etc. And just because that person may or may not be a member of that group, you don't know if their friends are. You don't know if their friends' friends are. And if it is out on the internet, it is there forever. So be careful with this. It doesn't at all mean that you can't celebrate, but you just want to be thinking about the ethical nature of it and the way that it is coming across. Now, I said that coaching is not a regulated industry. However, you need to be careful with staying abreast of any what we call duty to warn laws in your local area, in your country, in your province, in your state, etc. Most places at least have some sort of rule about if a client tells you that he or she plans to hurt themselves or hurt someone else, you just need to know what the statute is for you. What is your responsibility? Are you supposed to call the police? Are you supposed to call a licensed professional? Are you allowed to not do anything at all? I just recommend that you take a peek at that. Now, a very common question that comes up in coaching is, when do I refer out? How do I know that a client has moved into territory that I'm not really qualified to treat? I tend to tell people about the 4 Ds. This is what they give us as counselors, and it serves for coaches as well. You need to be thinking about referring out if there is a certain threshold of dysfunction in your client. So, say you're working with a woman on healthy eating and something happens to her, and suddenly she's no longer able to go. She's depressed to the point where she's no longer able to go to work. She's no longer getting up and showering. And then we're not just talking about a bad day. It's now been day 3, day 4, oh God, 2 weeks. That's a certain threshold that you should probably suggest some counseling in, either concurrent counseling alongside your coaching, or maybe the coaching needs to be put on hold until she gets her life back in the saddle and can come back to do the work that you guys are working on. Distress. Now, again, these are all idiopathic to the person. It's not just a flat across the board. I wish it were. It would make ethics so much simpler, but it's not. It's about for this person, you've been working with this person for a week, and all of a sudden they come in and they are just freaking the hell out. Like they tell you that they can't stop crying all day. They've got, panic attacks. So their distress level has gone above your pay grade, above what you know to do with. You should probably refer out. Deviance. Nobody likes this word. And, it's got a certain stigma and pathology to it. But that aside, it is important that you consider legal concerns. You do not want the cops to hear about your coaching practice. This client, they've broken the law and they're like, oh, well, I see so and so. So if you become aware that your client is engaging in activity that is probably illegal, you at least want to have a conversation with them. And if it goes beyond what you are able to comfortably work with, refer out. The last one should be an obvious danger to self or others. Your client becomes suicidal or homicidal, or is even talking about it, dancing around it in any sort of way, please recommend that they seek professional help. Handling conflict. You guys still with me? I hope so. Let's say that you and a client have been moving along quite famously, but all of a sudden, you say something and your client doesn't take it very well. This is what we call therapeutic rupture. And it tends to freak both coaches and therapists out, but you don't need to. You know why? Because every relationship, whether it's therapist, client, parent, child, friend, business partner to business partner, is going to hit a bump in the road. Again, typically with coaching or counseling, it's around session 3 to 6. And it can be very helpful, actually. Conflict is helpful and healthy. You're going to hear a lot more about that. And I'm sure you may have already seen articles on that on Facebook. Because what happens is that it's intimacy building. It's actually can build rapport when you and I decide that we don't agree upon something, but when we handle it well, that then becomes a shared experience, which cannot help but be intimacy building. So, coaching naturally stirs up intense feelings at times, right? People are coming to you saying, hey, I'm stuck, help. You go to help with whether it's mindset, healthy behaviors, getting more vulnerable so they can make more money by showing up on Facebook. It's going to bring up intense feelings. And if a client does not handle that well and somehow makes you the scapegoat for it, this provides an opportunity for what we call a corrective emotional experience. Now, instead of being burnt like they have been 50 million times in the past, anytime that they've opened up to someone, they've got you who is just exuding this non judgmental, very accepting space. And I've had clients even say, fuck you, this is hard. And I'm like, I know, fuck me, right? They can see that, hey, my ego is safe and secure. It's protected. It's okay for you to be upset with me. I'm not going to run or flinch away from it. In fact, I'm going to be here to process through it with you in a way that nobody else has before. Just a side story, even Ashley and I, both well trained in psychology, knowing that this is absolutely a possibility. It is inevitable to have a, I call them a glitch moment. And she and I even had one in the development of this course. And both of us were just astounded and happy in a great way to have that pleasant surprise. This is why we're such a kick ass team, to recognize that the other one was safe to process with, had no problems taking in our, pointed questions and working through any odd feelings to make sure that we both felt strong and secure in becoming a kick-ass collaboration together and making this course for you. And so it was a wonderful corrective emotional experience for us both, having been burnt in other group projects before. So if you are able to handle any resistance from a client and say, "Hey, I'm here for you. Let's talk it out." Oh my God, you're going to have a dream client for life. Now, common word in the psych field that we feel coaches need to understand as well is transference. And with that comes countertransference. Basically, I love this picture. You've noticed the two guys here. Notice there's a coach or a counselor and his client, right? The client now looks exactly like the coach. And it says you have a very bad case of transference, which means you are transferring on, a client is transferring their thoughts, emotions, behaviors onto you from a previous relationship or another relationship in their life. So I have had therapists who have reminded me of my mother, my father, my sister, a group client, a peer. It's unavoidable. You can't help it. The brain makes very quick judgments about people. It's an evolutionarily adaptive function. We need to be able to make quick judgments. We need to be able to recognize, ooh, this feels like something else. It was important for our survival. We didn't have time way back in the jungle to decide whether something was a saber-toothed tiger or just a bush. So the brain had to quickly make a judgment and then act on it. And so even if we're not aware of it in the forefront of our mind, if a situation starts to feel like a relationship we have in other areas, it's either going to be very useful if we happen to love that person, or very unuseful. Could even be destructive. Not a bad thing though. You're also going to have it. That's countertransference. So I've had clients that have reminded me of exes or my mother, my sister, etc. What you do in that moment is key. Number one, you just take note of it. I'm having a feeling. Now, is this related to just this particular client, or is there another situation in my life in the past that this reminds me of? You don't necessarily need to terminate with this client. Please understand that. In fact, we'd rather you not. But you do need to own your own biases. If I have a client that reminds me of an ex partner, I need to pay attention to that, to work through it perhaps with my own coach, and to make sure that it stays out of that therapeutic room. However, there's also ways that you can use it for your good, because perhaps if I'm going with a client reminding me of an ex partner, maybe I have done therapeutic work on that. Maybe now, because of it, I can recognize symptoms of narcissism or symptoms of codependency. And now I can, in the back of my head while that client's talking, go, I think this might be an issue. This can then inform my treatment plan, right? Because I happen to know that there are certain ways that narcissists might like to be dealt with as opposed to the rest of the general population, or somebody who struggles with codependency. It's not a value judgment. It just informs how I'm going to work with this client. And that is a way that it can be used for good, because chances are, if you're feeling a particular way about a client, it is highly likely that multiple people in their lives have also felt this way about this client. And so you can absolutely now use it to be that corrective emotional experience. When you are able to point out in love that a client is coming across, for example, as helpless or as haughty, you name it, fill in the adjective, and they trust you enough to allow for change, bam, I mean, now you're kicking ass. Now you're able to affect even more transformation for this client and not only them, but everyone else in their life will thank you for it. Now, we cannot talk about ethics integrity without making sure that you, dear one, have your own sacred space. Who is supporting you? Ashley and I both believe that it is vital to have your own coach. And we can usually tell the difference between someone who keeps their own mentors around them and someone who does not. Let me tell you, as a therapist who has been to other therapists and as a coach who trains coaches and also keeps her own coaches, I can tell you which ones know what it's like to be on the couch, so to speak. And which ones do not. So it's important, number one, not only to have emotional support, you're a coach. You're going to have one of the most profound industries, profound careers of anyone on the planet. People are trusting you, entrusting you with their secrets, their goals, their fears. You're going to be dealing with some heavy shit. It is so important at the end of the day that you have someone else to hold space for you, not just in a brain dump, not just in a gossipy sort of way, but someone who is able to lovingly nurture you and cradle you back up when you are emotionally drained or when your brain feels like it just needs to shut off. It's also vital because you need that feedback. There are going to be areas, like we talked about before, blind spots that you might be unaware of. And I've had coaches go, "Oh, hey, Tams, girlfriend, it appears that this client might be provoking this in you, you know? Maybe you still have an area of unworthiness that you may have thought you dealt with, but isn't completely dealt with. And we can use this to help you become an even better coach. Again, don't be afraid of having quote unquote vulnerabilities or shortcomings. We're all human. And it's actually what makes your clients going to be drawn to you is going to be your relatableness. But it's important to have that feedback so that you can always be moving forward in your career. And speaking of moving forward, Ashley and I both believe in the power of continuing education. Now, coaching, they can't make you, but guys and gals, why would you not want to? There's always amazing new stuff on the horizon. So I've gone out and become a Reiki master teacher. So is Ashley. I went and got certified in giving oracle card readings. I'm considering like theta training. There's tapping. There's new ways of talking to people. I've constantly been learning about new theories. Your clients are going to be lit up when they see that you are always working to provide new modalities, to provide deepening process for them. Now, how are you feeling? I hope this has just whet your appetite and that you guys are super excited for next week. I know that a lot of this was really in depth and it can provoke some hesitations and fears at first. Like, oh my fucking God, that was a lot of stuff on ethics, right? If you have questions, please bring them to the Facebook group or to our live group call. Ashley and I are going to be there with you every step of the way, and we want to provide support and feedback for you. I cannot wait to see you guys on the internet. Thank you for joining me today.